I love Korea. I love those people there. They have a certain quality that's very heartwarming. I count one of the great experiences of my life the times that I have spent with our Korean friends. And it's just a tremendous experience to see the growth of the church in that country. The great underlying fact is that here's a small country that has passed through a terrible war, just a terrible war, that took an awful toll on its people, on its resources, on everything it had.
This is one of the benefits that came out of those terrible, tragic wars, that we had lots of LDS servicemen out there, and they went right to work and organized themselves and set up their servicemen's branches and districts and auxiliaries, and they were carrying on the program of the church in Japan and in Okinawa especially, and also in Korea.
I served the mission in Australia from 1949 to 1951. And my mother kept all my letters, and recently I was transcribing them, and I found a letter from October. I'd been there about 2 months, and it said this: I feel as if there's something greater for me to do when I get home as far as converting people. It makes me feel that somewhere else there's a greater mission for me to perform. This is just the foundation. And I didn't know what that meant then. I was in Australia when the war started, and I was home for about 3 months when I was drafted. And when I went to Korea, I was transferred from Daegu, the prisoner of war command, then to Busan. And then I first met some Latter-day Saints in the Korean group in Busan. Sundays we had a regular church meeting, sometimes twice on Sundays, in the afternoon and again in the evenings. We would get 80 to 100 people on Sundays and twice that many during the week. Tuesdays we taught English. Saturdays we played games. Sundays we worshiped and taught the gospel. They liked what we were teaching. We started the Articles of Faith. That's what we taught, is the Articles of Faith. And they listened, they asked questions, and many of them wanted to accept the gospel. And we're slow to baptize them because we want to make sure where their interests were. It was 6:30 in the morning on a Sunday morning in the middle of July when we went down to the bay and baptized some people, maybe 15 or 20 Koreans there that day. They had to go out about 75 yards and do the baptisms. And the day was spent with them, pictures taken. There were more Koreans, there were only 5 GIs there. And it was really a morning to never forget. In October, we were having so many people, Koreans, come to our church services. We needed some help. So 2 of us, Grant Heaton and myself, flew to Japan and went to the mission home with President Robertson and his wife, and told him we needed help. We needed manuals, we needed advice, we needed counseling when people could speak Korean, and told him we wanted him to come to Korea and see. And we were preparing a Christmas pageant. This was as early as October of 1953. So in October of 1953, he came to Korea. He was late because transportation wasn't scheduled very well. And we had taught the Koreans how to sing Silent Night, Holy Night. They learned how to sing a verse in Korean, a verse in English, and hum a verse. We had an auditorium full of people, 200 or 300. We waited, I don't know how long, for him to come, and when I gave up and we began singing, he came in the middle of it. And I've never, ever, anywhere heard a hymn sung so beautifully and with so much spiritual strength as that song. And he came in and he sensed it and heard it. And that's when he went back to Japan and notified Salt Lake that we had a special thing going, needed help.
Dr. Kim, who was the great pioneer of the work there, and must ever be remembered as such, laid a foundation that was largely comprised of younger people. And it's on that foundation that the church has been built in that land.
In 1951, Ho-Jae Kim was a graduate student at Cornell. And as he associated with his fellow students, he noticed one man in particular who didn't behave as the others did. And this man was Oliver Wayman. And so impressed with Oliver's good example, Ho-Jae Kim approached him one day and said, "You know, I've been watching you. You don't behave as these other students do. You're different."
We're just sitting chatting. He wanted to know what church I belonged to. I told him I belonged to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he said, "Well, do you have any literature that I could read?" So I gave him the Articles of Faith. In about a week's time, he came back. He said he had read that book through in a week. And he said, "That is the best discussion of the gospel that I've ever read." He said, "Do you have anything else that I can read?" So I gave him a copy of the Book of Mormon. He read that around a week's time too. And he came back, he says, "That's the word of the Lord." I asked him again why he came to Cornell, and he repeated he came there to get the newer knowledge of nutrition. And I just felt impelled to tell him, "I think there was another reason that you came. You came here to get the gospel so that you could take it back to your people."
He was converted and came into the church, was baptized in the Susquehanna River at a spot as near as they could figure out where the prophet Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery were first baptized.
When he came up out of the river, out of the water, he heard a voice say, "Feed my sheep." And this is recorded in the front of his scriptures. I have his scriptures, and there's a little picture of his baptism in there, and it says, "Words given, feed my sheep." And he really spent the rest of his life doing that.
2 Corinthians, I remember, chapter 3, verse 2 starts. Apostle Paul to the saints in Corinth area, "Ye are our epistle." And that's a tremendous meaning there, the example. Heavenly Father would not be pleased if we only function as a messenger. We must be message itself at the same time. Dr. Kim Ho-Jae, I owe him a great deal. He is a great example.
Among the general authorities, the first to come to Korea was Elder Harold B. Lee of the Council of the 12. He came in 1954 on a survey reconnaissance tour from the First Presidency to decide whether or not we should send missionaries to Korea. And we had a large gathering of Latter-day Saints at Hialeah Compound in Busan. And we had several of these Koreans who had joined the church. And Elder Lee met these people and even had a couple of them bear their testimonies. And after the meeting, we got together in a Quonset hut, Elder Lee and I, to spend the night. And he said, "Oh, Brother Palmer, I just want you to know that I feel the Spirit of the Almighty in the eyes and the hearts and the words of these young Koreans who are here. I'm going to recommend that we open Korea for missionary work."
The first missionaries entered Korea in April of 1956, Elder Don Powell and Elder Richard Denton. And then I sent Elder Dean Anderson and Elder Newell Kimball a couple months later and built them up as rapidly as I could. Hepatitis proved to be the most serious threat to the health of the missionaries. In 1958, we had 10 missionaries in Korea and 5 of them had hepatitis. I decided what I should do is go to Korea and meet with all the missionaries there, all 10 of them, and find out how they felt about it. Now, I knew that the time was right for the missionaries to be in Korea, or I wouldn't have sent them there in the first place. And so I knew that it was the will of the Lord that they stay in Korea. When I arrived in Seoul, I invited the missionaries up from Busan, and we had our meeting. I felt that even though that it was the will of the Lord that they stay there, nevertheless, I didn't feel it would be right for me to ask them to stay there and risk their lives unless they wanted to. And each one of them had made the decision that they were going to stay in Korea, even though it was necessary for them to die there. And that was my feeling also. I told them I felt it was the will of the Lord. Fortunately, no one died. Through their wonderful faith, those who had hepatitis overcame it. And each of those 10 missionaries, completed their missions in Korea and did a marvelous work.
Now, all up and down South Korea, we have branches, we have buildings. We have that beautiful structure, the temple in Seoul. We have missions with many missionaries. What a glorious thing it is to see the work there and to know the people there.